Hey, good morning. Welcome back. It's Zach here. Appreciate you all joining me today. A couple of things that's been on my mind a little bit as of recent couple of weeks is a few different things. Been going through a bunch of things, been learning a bunch of different things, been reflecting and writing on a few things and hitting quite a few revelations that I think I would love to share with you all if you've got a moment. One of those things, I think, first and foremost, most controversial of all, comes from the famous, illustrious Mr. Andrew Tate. Hate him or love him, the underdog's on top, as 50 says, right? But but I think what I saw pop up, he was on George Janko's podcast recently, and I've heard him talk about this before, so it's nothing new. But he was talking again about the best motivation for men in life should be not from happiness, because in his words, he believes that happiness is not a strong enough motivation for men. In fact, it's a weak motivation for men. And what does that really mean? And I agree with him there. What does that really mean? I don't think happiness should be a good motivator for you in your direction of things. Instead, he would like to be a champion for the idea of pride, and pride being the biggest motivation for men, and that he believes that pride is the strongest motivation you could have for yourself as a man, and that it will propel you forward on a myriad of different life circumstances, and essentially be the cornerstone for your success in your life if you were to use pride as your motivation in your life. On the surface level, it seems true, right? It sounds good. The way that he says it is always great. He's a fantastic talker. He paints very illustrious pictures. And what I'm thinking of, though, when I'm listening to that, I'm like, I don't know, something doesn't sit right with me there, with pride being the motivation. Pride, we all know pride as being one of the 7 deadly sins, right? We're all aware of that. We know that pride is portrayed in a way of people really seeing somebody as prideful, as distasteful. We have a little bit of a gut reaction to it. So I wanted to think about it a little bit longer than it just being a gut reaction. I thought, okay, yeah, why don't I agree with that? What is it about that I'm not agreeing? Now, George on this podcast went through a bunch of different things, but I don't think he quite hit the nail. He sort of hit around it a little bit. What I think the main issue with pride is, and why it's so detrimental to you, that I do not believe it's any use to you to navigating life, nor do I believe it a good motivating factor, is simply because pride is a hindrance to your progression as a human being. If we all understand human beings are the line, right? When Solzhenitsyn talks about that the line between good or evil runs through the heart of every man, we are that line. We are that line between order and chaos. We are the line between unbridled creativity and unbridled destruction. So, in that same sense, we are the things that progress forward, continually change. And if we are those things that continually change and adapt and grow better as circumstances arise and as we change and we adapt and we learn more, anything that's telling us that we don't need to learn more, or that I have the answers, or I am great the way I am now, is going to be a hindrance to that. It's going to hinder your progression from life, because I think we're all, it's kind of the same thing, but flipped at the coin, right? Where we hear people talk about, oh, don't worry, you're beautiful the way you are, you're perfect the way you are, you should just accept the way you are. And we all sort of understand that if we really think about that for a moment, it's like, oh, really? I'm perfect the way I am? man, I'm pretty shit right now, dog. I'm not great right now. I want to be better, but you're saying that I'm perfect the way I am. It's a little bit disheartening. Pride is the same thing, but on the flip, pride is saying I am perfect the way I am because I know it. It's not saying you are, it's saying I am, right? It's saying I am perfect the way I am. It's saying that I have all the answers. I know the directions. You know, what I have here in myself is more than enough. I'm more than capable of doing everything. Pride, it's a blinding thing. It blinds you to opportunities, to answers, to growth, to reflection, to myriad of different things. It's not a good navigator for your life because it simply blinds you to all things within your life. And that's one of the things I was thinking about when I heard that and was wrestling with that, thinking, okay, why don't I agree with that? There's many things that Andrew talks about. And I've listened to, I don't know, tens of hours, hundreds of hours perhaps now of Andrew talking through various different circumstances and things like that, because he is somebody that's worth listening to, particularly when they appear to be a bit of a zeitgeist, right? A spirit of the times, right? When somebody presents themselves as that, I think you should stop and listen to what they have to say, because not particularly for them, not specifically for them individually, but because of what the times has manifested into the amalgamation of this person here that everybody's looking at. I think it's important to look at that. Whenever you see something that's big and it's reflective of the times, look at that real quick, because you're going to be able to orientate yourself around that and be reflective of yourself. Now, you wouldn't look at that if you were prideful, right? If you had all the answers, if you knew you were the best, right? Now, I'm not saying, all right, be your own worst enemy. Don't cast yourself aside. All I'm saying is that pride isn't the answer here. Pride isn't what's going to take you to the next step. Now, of course, the natural thing is, well, okay, then what is? What is that then? If it's not happiness, if it's not pride, if it's not motivation, what is it? I think the answer is discipline and habits are what going to propel you forward in life. Now, both of those things aren't innate. Well, I think in a way, some habits are, right? You can easily form bad habits, right? you know, I think that both those things are the best motivating factors to propel you forward in life when times get tough, because they're autopilot in a way, because you can get them to a way where they are autopilot, where you don't need to think about them. You can get your habits to a place where they're habitual. You don't think about them. They just happen, right? We see that time and time again with our negative habits, right? Or perhaps not the word negative, but habits that are detrimental to our life and then the progression of our life. We see that with those habits. So the same must be true for the habits on the flip side, habits that progress us forward in our lives, whatever they may be for you specifically. I don't know. Telling the truth would be a good habit to cultivate. Working out would probably be a good habit to cultivate. But unfortunately, unlike our regressive habits, ones that keep us the same or stagnate us, or worse, tear us backwards in life's progression, unlike those habits, the flip side habits require an extra bit of source to them. Now, yes, you can get them up to a place of which they are habitual, but it doesn't seem, for me personally at least, it doesn't seem, and what I've read with other people of just incredible life circumstances and journeys, and those that would seem to be inhuman, say David Goggins or something like that, it seems to me that habits aren't enough to get you through it, but they're one of the cornerstones to cultivate for it. Because good habits, ones that progress you forward, require a second source. And that second source is discipline. I think discipline in your habits, now, the more you do things, the easier that discipline's going to be, for sure, easily. But that discipline for whatever it is that you're cultivating in that habit is what's going to propel you forward. So discipline and habits, I think, instead of pride, I think discipline and habits are what going to get you through the tough times. Because when you're faced with adversity and things are tearing you down, if you've cultivated enough discipline habits into your life, it's going to be very tough for things to take you down. Now, look, you could say, well, what if I stop doing those things? But that's where discipline comes in. And that's where, hopefully, at that point in time, your habitual nature that you've cultivated in yourself through doing these things is going to help propel you forward alongside your discipline. Now, I mean, still reflecting on all these sorts of things, right? There perhaps could be a few different things associated to that which I'm missing. But at this point in time, I would stop there and say, those are the things that I've reflected on, which have been most interesting about that there. Another thing that popped up, bring up my notes, is that anxiety is a marker for new and transformational experiences. Now, I'm a person in life who, I would say, up until maybe a year or two ago, I would say I've never experienced the sensation of an anxiety in my life. And I didn't know what that felt like. Now, I've performed on stages for hundreds and hundreds of people at any given time. I've had the spotlight on me many, many times in those circumstances. You know, there's been very, 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 very stressful situations throughout my life, with the birth of my daughter being a complication, with myriad of other different things going on throughout my life too, which have complicated things as well, been major stresses and anxiety-inducing situations, as you'd sort of describe them, right? But yet they haven't presented myself or haven't encountered those sensations of anxiety in my life. And so I didn't think or put much stock in it. And whenever I would hear somebody say, "Oh, I suffer from anxiety," I'd think, "Oh God, really? You're just weak." You just things like that. And to a degree, I think that's still true. And I'll get into why I mean that. But what I'm thinking now, and I was hearing this talked through by Robert Greene and Andrew Huberman on their podcast, and it led me some self-reflection on that. And I had been reflecting on this for a long time anyways, but the idea that I've never experienced anxiety is coming from a place that I've always escaped it before it's happened, through a myriad of different things, right? Through, masturbation, through, scrolling, through, bushwalking, through going to the gym, through all these sort of things like that. I'd always managed to escape that feeling of anxiety before it would really present itself. And so I'd never experienced it in my life, because for somehow, somewhere along the way, I had cultivated this ability to then sort of sense that it was oncoming, and then just subconsciously avert or subvert or just route around it through different circumstances or habits that I had cultivated in myself. And so I never experienced it. I never thought that was a bad thing, right? Until the other day, when I sort of was thinking this through and heard Robert Greene talk about this, was that anxiety should be a marker that you're on the right path. It's a marker of transformational experience. And I was thinking, that's an interesting way to think about it. That's an interesting way to look at it. Because I never looked at it that way before. I'd always thought those that experience anxiety are just those that are just weak and incapable and, just silly or whatever it might be. But now that I'm thinking about it, like, oh, hang on, no. If I'm not experiencing anxiety, then I'm not experiencing circumstances that are large enough to propel me forward, to cultivate strength within me, to change me, to transform me, to perhaps make me the person I need to be to have the life that I want to have. And if I'm not experiencing these anxieties, it's probably a marker that I'm not on the right path. I'm not doing the right things. They say if you don't have, what would you say? They say if you don't have haters, you can't have lovers, right? Right? You're not doing the right thing. You're not presenting yourself to the world the right way. I think that's true. I think that's interesting to think about, is that in the same way that if you're not experiencing anxiety, you're probably not on the right path. So that was a little bit of self-reflection. I think, think about that. Ponder on that yourself. Think about, is it in your life too? Have you been experiencing this as well? Another thing too, I was thinking about as well, is that my thoughts on. I was having these reflections the other day on AI, on artificial intelligence and language models and what have you, and all these sorts of things like that. And for some reason, I was having a little bit of an epiphany and correlation moment between, those stories that we would hear back in the day, many centuries and centuries ago, thousands of years ago, where, ancient Greek philosophers would talk about the gods. And they would always talk about the gods as if the gods envied us, because they would always want to get involved in our lives. They would always want to meddle in things. They would always want to change things. They want to manipulate things in our life. And what you end up sort of questioning is like, why do the gods envy us so much? Why do they envy us so much? And then the logical conclusion is that, it's because we have limitations on our life. And those limitations on our life is what makes life so interesting. It's what makes life so fun. It's Alan Watts' story of the dreamer. That if you could dream any dream, you go to sleep at night, you could dream any dream that you want, you would dream the most fantastical dream possible. You're creating universes, stopping time, reversing time, speeding time up. You're creating suns, you're creating life, you're creating things, you're doing the impossible things, and so on and so forth. Anything you dream of is possible. And you're living 80 years in one night as you dream. You just experience an entire lifetime in one single dream. And you'd wake up and you'd think, wow, what a dream. That was crazy. That was incredible. And so you think, wow, tomorrow night I'm going to do that again. That's exciting. And say you do that for the next couple of days and you have a couple more lifetimes in those days, right? You sort of wake up and you think, okay, I'm getting a little bit bored with this. What can I do to fire this up a little bit? What can I do to make this a little bit riskier? And so I think you then start placing limitations on yourself, right? You go to sleep and you're like, well, what if I could get hurt in this? Okay, that's exciting. Okay, let's go to sleep. And you go to sleep and you're like, whoa, whew, that was thrilling. What if I could do? What if I have this limitation? What if I could actually die? And you go to sleep and you like have that dream. You're like, whoa, that was crazy. I died in that dream. That was an experience. That was a rush. And then you have this other epiphany. You think, what if I forget it's a dream? And then thus, here we are now, is the conclusion to that, right? And so you understand from that story a bunch of different things. But the point I want to make out in that story is that limitations that you place upon yourself is what makes life exciting. And gods don't have limitations on themselves. They can create whatever they want to create. They want to do whatever they want to do. They can live for however long they want to do. They don't even need to raise a finger to have things created for them. And it's done. And so how does this connect back to AI? I think that we're on the precipice of becoming the gods that envy us. We are about to become those gods. Because as soon as artificial intelligence is reached, perhaps it already is, perhaps it isn't, as soon as it is reached, you know, money will probably cease to be important. You know, certain jobs will cease to be important. You know, as soon as artificial intelligence creates for itself a body to encapsulate and maneuver things in the world, and there's no more tasks for us to be done, as soon as we can sort of raise our finger, right, like a god, raise our finger, and artificial intelligence does it, like our superpower, like our godlike power, we're going to start to envy those. Actually, no, take it back a step. We're going to start to have a life of which we just, sit in a nice hot tub and eat cake, which seems good at a time, but you've just taken away all of life's excitements from yourself. And now you think, well, good, give it to me. I want life's excitements. I want to do nothing. I want to do things. It's like, yeah, I don't think so. If you play that out over multiple years, that's going to get very, very, very boring. And then if we then prolong our lifespan too, and if we make ourselves immortal, all of a sudden we've just created ourselves to be gods. And now we're going to envy everything that is not immortal, everything that has to struggle to survive, everything that has risk to their lives. All of a sudden we've just placed ourselves upon Olympia and we're looking down upon mankind. And I think that's what AI is going to do to us, is that sooner or later we're going to realize that the things that we're giving up is actually what makes us human. And what makes us human is what's really exciting about life. It's exciting that when I love my wife, I also accept fully that I could lose her. She could die tragically. Same with my daughter. I love them so much that in loving them so much, I also have to accept the fact that I could have my heart completely torn out of my chest from doing so too. Because if I couldn't, then it's not love. And I'm just not even sure what you would call that. And I think we're on the precipice of that moment where we're going to realize very, very quickly that there's a reason why gods envy us. There's a reason why when you're the dreamer in a dream, and you could dream any dream, you're the creator of these things, you want to forget you're the dreamer. You want to forget that you have, no risks involved with life. You want to forget that. You want to imagine life. You take it to the furthest extent, and in doing so, what you're going to do is you're going to find yourself sitting, watching this podcast, listening to this right now. You're going to find yourself here right now as you are. Because if you can dream any dream, you can be the creator of this universe. You're going to find yourself as you are now. Because it's fun. It's a good dance. It's a great dance. It's an interesting dance. I'll leave you with that. 3 different things to think about. Thanks so much.